Alright guys, M-Tech Guy here, and today we're going to be taking a look on how to properly bleed your cooling system on your E30, specifically your E30 with the M42 engine, the twin cam which was installed on the 318is models. Now owners of these cars have struggled with bleeding the cooling system on these vehicles for years, and E30s with the M42 engine are notoriously difficult to bleed the cooling system, and if you mess it up, if you end up with air trapped in the system, you're going to cause damage to your cooling system, possibly your engine, and if you end up with air trapped in the heater matrix, you're going to compromise the seal in your heater valve and it's going to leak coolant into your interior. Not cool. And there's even stories from back in the day when these cars were relatively new, where even the BMW dealerships would struggle to carry out the bleed procedure properly on these vehicles, which would lead to customers coming back shortly afterwards that had a coolant change, with reports of the temperature gauge working erratically, obviously because there was still air trapped in the system. And unlike most E30s, these only have one bleed point at the top of the radiator. So if you're doing a coolant change on one of these vehicles or replacing a component of the cooling system and you need to refill the system afterwards, of course you're going to want to bleed it, and we want to avoid any of these issues. Now I made a video recently on carrying out some repairs on my cooling system, which followed with a cooling system bleed. So to be able to help you guys out, what I'm going to do is reuse some of that footage to put together a step-by-step guide. So let's take a look on how to bleed the cooling system properly on your E30 with the M42 engine. Alright, so what you want to do first is get the front end of the car up in the air, and what that'll do is create a high point at the bleed point there, because at the moment as the car sits level it's more or less in line with your heater, so you want that to be the highest point right at the bleed point at the top of the radiator, because of course all the air is going to bleed out to the top. Now it doesn't need to be up on axle stands or anything like that, you just want it higher at the front end. So what I normally do is just run the front of the car up on some blocks of wood. Right, so we'll start off by removing the cap, and we're going to take a flat blade screwdriver and I'm going to take this bleed plug out completely at this stage. And inside the car what we're going to do is turn the ignition to position 1 and turn the heater fan to the hottest setting, and then the fan speed just to that first one. As long as the heater's in the hottest position, that's the main thing. With the ignition on, what that'll do is open the heater control valve and it'll get that coolant flowing through the heater matrix, push any air out of there back to the bleed point. So now we're going to slowly fill the system with a 50-50 mix of coolant and water. I'm using a pre-mix today, and with the bleed plug out, what it's going to do is force all that air out of that point. So we're going to keep filling it slowly. We need to fill it slowly, and we're going to wait until there's a steady stream of coolant coming out of there with no bubbles. Now as we go, we might have to stop now and again and just squeeze the upper and the lower radiator hoses just to burp things, just to burp the system as we go, and that's also going to help pump the coolant round the system through the radiator and everything. Normally I'd use a funnel, but I don't have one at the moment, so I'm going to rinse things down afterwards anyway, so a little bit of spillage isn't the end of the world. It's filling up nicely, so just give them hoses a little bit of a squeeze before we go any further. So I'm just going to keep filling until we see a steady stream come out of that bleeder hole. Just give the hoses another squeeze. Now I'll continue filling. Go. So we're getting there now. See a load of air bubbles come out of there. We're not quite there just yet, but we'll give that lower and up hose a bit of a squeeze there. Just help it gulp some of that down. And we'll continue filling. So a steady stream coming out of there now. So now at the bleed point it's primed completely, no bubbles, full of liquid. So what we're going to do now is reinsert the bleeder plug, and now I'm going to fit the new bleeder plug I bought. Right, so what we're going to do next is I'm going to start the engine, and as it starts to run, this level's going to start dropping as it just fills up the system. We're going to keep it running until the engine's nice and warm and that thermostat's got to the stage where it's open. We'll know it's open because the top radiator hose will feel hot, and it's likely we might have to top up the expansion tank as the engine's running as things warm up, so you just want to try and keep it above that cold mark. And then once we get to the stage where that top hose is hot, when the thermostat's open, what we're going to do is make sure that the heater's blowing hot inside the cabin. And what we'll do then is just gently open this bleeder screw. We're not going to remove it, we're just going to crack it open just to bleed any last air out. And we're going to tighten that down, put the cap on. Right, let's start it up, and it will take a little bit of time to warm up. Right, so we'll let that warm up and do its thing. It's been running for quite some time now. Everything's nice and warm. That upper radiator hose is definitely hot. The temperature gauge is just about in the middle, and then the heater vents are blowing nice and warm now, so that's a good indication there shouldn't be any trapped air in the system. Right, now we're at the stage where we're confident the thermostat's open, with that top hose being warm and also the temperature gauge being more or less in the middle. So what I might do before we go any further is just give that upper and lower radiator hose a bit of a squeeze just to burp any last air out the system. So we'll start with the lower. Try the top one. As you can see, the level's dropping. So what I might do is just give it a bit of a top up at this stage before we get too carried away. Again, we'll just do the lower hose. Just keeping an eye on that temperature gauge as well inside the vehicle. Make sure it's not going over halfway or getting too hot. Do another top up. We don't want the level to get too low. We don't want to be introducing air at the expansion tank if we can help it. Trying to get rid of the air, not get it into the system. I'm going to keep massaging this lower hose, this lower radiator hose slowly. As you can see, it is taking the level down. It's gulping it into the system. Now we're getting to the stage where it's not gulping it down anymore. You can see it's just maintaining that level as I squeeze it. Now we'll just give the upper hose a bit more. I can feel them hoses are getting really hot now as well. We'll just keep an eye on that temperature gauge again. It's looking all right, it's just below halfway. You can see that level's not really dropping now. So it should have gulped in all of the coolant and displaced any air in the system. Again, we'll just finish up with the top hose. It's getting really hot now. Now what I'm going to do now is just crack open the bleeder screw just to expel any last bit of air out of the system. So might get a shot of air out of there, and then we're going to just crack it until we get a steady stream of coolant. No air, no bubbles. And just be aware there could be a spurt of coolant and it's going to be very hot. Just go slowly. Should be able to hear any air coming out of there. Right, doesn't seem to be any air coming out, just coolant, no bubbles. So now we can reinstall the cap. And we're going to let it run just for a little longer, just to build up some pressure, just to make sure everything looks okay. That temperature gauge is sitting pretty much bang in the middle now. I'm really happy with that. The heaters are pumping hot air out there now. Beautiful. And while you're busy with this bleed procedure, it is worth just keeping an eye on that temperature gauge. You don't want it to go over the halfway mark. If it does start creeping up, you certainly don't want it going anywhere near the red. So if it does start creeping up over the halfway mark to the 3/4 mark, obviously something's not right. So just shut everything off and reassess the situation. Right, so that's been running for a little while now. So to finish off, I'm just going to crack the bleeder screw again. Just now there's a bit of pressure in there just to make sure every last bit of air is expelled from the system. So again, we're going to open it slowly and be aware that there is incredibly hot coolant behind there. Right, so there's no bubbles coming out there. It's just a nice stream of coolant. So what that tells us is that now the system's completely bled. We've got solid liquid right to that high point. So we've displaced all the air out of the system. Right, we can now shut it off. Right, so what we'll do now is we'll just let things cool down, and then it is worth coming back just the following day just to check your level here. It should be sitting on the cold line or just above it. Now we are sitting a little bit high there at the moment because it is hot. The coolant's expanded, so we'll double check that the following morning. If it is still sitting really high, sometimes you can just suck a little bit out of there just to get the level corrected. So now it's the next day, so I think we'll just have a look in the engine bay now everything's cooled down and make sure everything's looking as it should do. Right, so the level's dropped a bit there, so that one's a bit of a top up. Right, so I've just given that a top up, so we'll bang on the calt line now. But yeah, easy as that. If you follow them steps, you shouldn't have any trouble bleeding your cooling system on your BMW E30 318is with an M42 engine.